Hello and welcome to another edition of Your Money, Your Life with Black Enterprise. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., your host, Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. And as always, we have a great conversation that focuses on our favorite topic, our main focus of Your Money, Your Life, which is your financial wellness. Yeah, we can get into the technical issues of managing money and you can get that anywhere. But we talk about not only what you should be doing with your financial decisions, but the way we feel about things and the way that our relationship with money and finances drives those choices. In order to change those behaviors, we got to address those feelings and emotions as well. Listen, I have a great guest because today we're going to be talking about what everybody's probably going to be talking about after we move past the holiday spending season. I know whatever holiday you call it, we end up spending a lot of money during those holidays, often going beyond the budget that we may have been very disciplined about all during the year. Usually at the end of the year, we have all kinds of emotional reasons to go beyond that, to please our families, to just get into the joy of the season, all those good things. But then usually we come back out of it, and now it's like, oh, wow, when the bills come due, are we really ready and prepared to do that? Deal with those bills. It's impacting our credit. It's impacting our balances. And today's guest is really someone who is both passionate and expert in dealing with those issues. Please welcome to the show my guest, Omari Hall of GreenPath Financial Wellness, who's head of innovation and diversity and a strategy leader for GreenPath. Welcome to the show, Omari.
I appreciate you. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for the opportunity.
So let's get into why you do what you do, how you came to do what you do. Tell me a little bit about your journey to what you're doing now for GreenPath.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, I am the innovation and diversity strategy leader at GreenPath, specifically GreenPath Innovation and Design, which is our innovation function at GreenPath. So just general information, GreenPath is a NFCC certified credit counselor, 501c3. We've been around since 1961. And our goal is to just help folks understand what their options are when it comes to dealing with their finances, whether it be helping with budgeting, helping understand their credit options. And in many cases, we have programs that we can set people up on, like our debt management program, which is an opportunity for us to negotiate lowered interest rates for credit cards and other types of unsecured debt, and put it together on a repayment plan to help folks pay off their debt a little bit more effectively. So to answer your question, my journey has been pretty unique because I came from, I'm a Detroiter, lifelong Detroiter, started off as a community organizer. As you can see, I got the Pistons jerseys in the background. I know we having a tough stretch right now, but we gonna be back soon.
Yeah, but your Lions, man, your Lions are just doing it up, bro.
Yeah, the Lions are, I'm a Lions fan too, and it's hard to even put in perspective what's happening right now because we never seen anything like this before. So hopefully they keep it up.
Well, I was raised a Giants fan, so I'm not in a great place these days.
Oh.
But my favorite all-time player, Barry Sanders.
Oh yeah,
I watch Barry Sanders highlights and I tear up to this day. Oh my God, it's a beautiful thing. So I feel you. I feel the, and also I was a huge fan of Matthew Stafford. I used to always feel bad for him when because he was a great quarterback. He is a great quarterback. I mean, you saw what he did.
No, for sure.
In the game, and so
Matt Stafford still gets love around here.
He got his ring. Even though he didn't get in Detroit, but I was like, oh yeah, man, Matthew, he deserves it because he played for that ring.
He was great.
He didn't get it in Detroit. He earned it.
I agree totally. I'm with you on that. But anyways, just to get back to it, I'm a big Detroit. Detroit is big on my spirit. So when I graduated from college, my first career was in community organizing. So I spent a lot of time connecting with key stakeholders at the neighborhood level, at the community level, and learned about how to understand the community narratives of the individuals who have their ear to the ground, who are doing the work, and just doing what I can to support and uplift and connect those networks. So that's where I got started. But as a young kid out of college, it was tough to make any real decent money in that nonprofits field, especially as you're just starting out. So I pivoted into the for-profit sector, and I worked for a large mortgage company for a number of years. And it was at that it was at that opportunity that I learned sort of the foundation around the finances piece that is so integral to my job today. So I learned about the financial logistics world. I learned about the financial, the laws and the sort of federal regulations that made our financial services system work the way that it works. And it was through that opportunity and that sort of foundational knowledge base that led me ultimately to GreenPath. And it was a great opportunity for me to combine my passion, which was rooted in community activism and helping people, especially folks that look like us, in addition to adding that to this foundation of financial education that I had learned in the mortgage world. And so GreenPath offered me a great opportunity to use both of those skills at the same time, which is a really awesome opportunity. I'm very grateful for it today.
See, and that was one of the reasons I was really happy to have the opportunity to have you on the show because, as I say to many of my guests on Your Money, Your Life, we're working in the same vineyard, just different parts of the same vineyard. We're laboring for the same thing. Obviously, Black enterprise is about the economic empowerment, financial empowerment, and wealth building of African Americans and other people, but certainly Black people, like you said, people who look like us. And it's about this passion for community advancement, but then to have the skill sets and the resources and the knowledge base necessary to help people, to educate people to advance. And of course, that financial education is more important with this generation going forward than ever, because now so much of our financial decision making is pushed into our own hands versus our parents or grandparents who had pensions and other things that was kind of taken care of. They just had to work, kind of keep their nose clean, and at the end of the day, get their gold watch, get their pension, and keep it moving. Now, we're supposed to manage our 401ks. We're supposed to manage our credit. We're supposed to manage those things. And that's good. But if you're not equipped to do it, then like you said, we see the outcomes in our communities.
And almost nobody is, unfortunately, right? Almost nobody is equipped to truly understand how to navigate the finances that they're going to be faced with into adulthood. And that's another big part of my story as well. I mean, I'm a millennial, and I graduated from college. When I entered college, there was still the expectation that if you go to college, you do well, you have your 4-year degree, you graduate, you get a job, you make the amount of money that you need to live comfortably, and that's it. It was a clear-cut expectation.
Yes.
By the time I graduated from college, the housing market had crashed. We entered a deep recession. And by the time I graduated, that was no longer, not only was it not a guarantee, it was almost, I was kind of on my own, right? And that's probably the reason why, and it happened to work out because I had a passion there as well. But like the nonprofit organizing space was one of the few spaces where there was opportunities to grow because it was coalescing around all the folks that were having hardship at that time, right? And even in our schools, we often don't have the type of educational support that really focuses on how to empower ourselves financially, or even just what to expect, right? Like understanding how credit works, understanding how to effectively budget, understanding how your taxes work. All of these things are lessons that you kind of don't, you hear your parents talking about it in the background. You might have a cursory conversation or two with them about it, but it's never something, unfortunately, that you get any real experience with until you have to deal with it. And oftentimes that involves learning hard lessons.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, and I'm a baby boomer, so I'm two or three steps and generations ahead of you in terms of age. But you have to explain to people that don't be hard on yourself when you talk about, oh, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, and I didn't know about interest rates, and I didn't know about what APR means. Because you could say earlier generations didn't make those mistakes, but I tell you, earlier generations couldn't make those mistakes. Women didn't have access to credit outside their husbands. Black people didn't have access to credit. So when my mother, I'm very good at saving and budgeting. So my mother was like, "You don't spend what you don't have," because she didn't have the luxury of, no, I can get this on credit. The closest thing they had, what my mother had, was layaway, which was
Yeah.
it was credit, but even then, you still was like
Kind of credit.
you were paying
Yeah.
down on it, and then you just knew at a certain time you finish pay, you get the product. But
Hmm.
I said in a way you could say, oh, previous generations were more financially responsible. I said, but not really.
Yeah.
They couldn't really get in but so much trouble, you know.
Yeah. The rules were different.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, credit, the concept of a credit score is not that much older than me. I think the credit score was introduced in the early to mid '80s,
Well, no,
right?
you're absolutely right.
Um,
When I was your age, I did, I couldn't know what my credit score was. I mean, the
yeah.
laws that passed that said no, people should be able to get access to their credit report
Hmm.
is a
Yeah, that's a
very,
recent thing.
very new thing. You're right.
Yeah.
So even when I was your age coming out of college,
Hmm.
I certainly had access to credit cards because I was at that generation. We were signing up for credit cards just to get 2 liter
Yeah.
bottles of soda. They didn't care. And then, of course,
Yeah. Yeah.
I spent my first 5 years of adulthood digging myself out of credit
I
card debt. I
bet.
don't even remember how I spent it because I just knew I thought credit was free money. So,
Yep.
but even at that point, I didn't know what my credit score was because you didn't have access to your credit report.
Hmm.
Those kinds of consumer education or consumer access to information laws didn't get passed until, I want to quote the year, but certainly after the 80s.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So and so it kind of leads into this conversation of, because one of the things that I used to talk to clients a lot about, and I still intersect with a lot in my work, is this question around how do you learn about finances? What were some of your earliest interactions or earliest memories with money? And almost always the conversation either goes in two directions. It's my parents talked to me about money and they told me these things that are useful in theory, but in terms of like actual practice now, things are so different that that feedback is less relevant. Or it goes in the other direction where, because we're so accustomed to talking about money from a shame standpoint, especially in the Black community, there was very limited conversation around money. And so either way, you have, burgeoning adults who have very little preparation for and it's obviously it's not covered in school in any real, it's certainly not anymore. You have these burgeoning adults who have very little experience or preparedness for the financial world that awaits them.
You hit that word shame, and I'd really want to delve in on that because, again, we're
Sure.
talking about financial wellness, and and now we're past the holiday season, and yeah,
Mhm.
there, there, there's a lot of guilt and shame around, oh, I didn't manage my money right. Oh, my credit score is bad. Oh, I'm dealing with too much debt, and one of the things I think we did a disservice. When I say we, I will say the financial media culture that Black Enterprise is part of. And I think there was a time, particularly in the 80s and 90s, when it was like, oh, if you had a high credit score, you were better than, there was almost like a, you know, yeah, absolutely, and therefore, and you may or may not be surprised of how strong that judgment can be for the Black enterprise audience, because I tell people it's the highly educated, successful person that's most ashamed of what they don't know about money. That's most ashamed that they have too much credit card debt, or most because they think they should. Like, I'm the one that's doing well, I should. And I say all that because of the importance of the work that you're doing with GreenPath, because
Yeah.
often the first thing that we have to help those we're trying to help, whether it's the Black enterprise audience or the clients that you deal with at GreenPath, get past is you are not sometimes there's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad person because you may have spent more than you planned to, or maybe your credit isn't the way you want it to be, or maybe you're carrying more debt that you want. That it's not a judgment of your value as a human being. You're not more valuable when your credit score is 800 and less valuable when your credit score is 500. And I think there was a period there that I'm hoping we're fighting to come out of, where we separate our value as human beings who are just trying to live and navigate life with constantly changing rules, to your point, to separate that from what I need to learn to get the better outcomes that I want. And I think a lot of times, and again, I think to some degree Black enterprise, but I've seen it as sort of as a broad part of the conversations about money and wealth, and about people literally feeling guilty
Oh yeah.
about, my credit score is only this or only that. And it became a status thing when it shouldn't be about status. And a big part of
Totally.
getting past or getting the help that you need to get better is not feeling ashamed about where you are now and not feeling yourself less of a person, but it's now you deserve whatever you got because you're just not. I mean, how much of that do you have to deal with in your work?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think you hit the nail right on the head. One of the word tracks that we literally use all the time in conversations with clients, and I'll give the disclaimer that in the second part of my career here at GreenPath, I'm no longer a financial wellness expert in the sense that I talk to clients on the phone,
Mhm.
but that's how I started. I spent half my career there
Mhm.
as a actual financial counselor in that sense. So in those conversations, one of the things that I would say literally almost every phone call was reassuring the client from an empathy perspective that you are not alone. This is not a thing to be ashamed of. You are not alone. We can help. And furthermore, your situation, even though I know it feels disparate, I know it feels really embarrassing in some cases, I know there's shame that comes along with it. It's not always unique. There are a lot of folks that are dealing with the same things from various walks of life, from various levels of education, various levels of income. There are a lot of folks that are really high earners that still struggle with debt because they never, if you think about it, right, to with respect to the Black enterprises audience, these are folks that have done really well, who have expectations for themselves and are high achievers. But we just talked about, we set the groundwork. At what point were they ever to be? At what point should they have encountered these step-by-step lessons to have them fully understand exactly what they were getting into when they started their finances? That's not a thing that ever happens. It doesn't happen in school, at least not anymore. I don't know if it did back in the day, but it certainly doesn't now. There aren't any specific college courses, or I should say general college courses, or kind of workforce readiness training. I think one of the biggest disservices that we as a society have have kind of thrust upon ourselves is that we take for granted and make the assumption that financial literacy is gained elsewhere. And honestly, in my experience, the only places where financial literacy is gained is through really, really privileged conversations with parents who happen to be really well versed for whatever set of circumstances, self research, which is hit or miss because there's a lot of stuff out there that don't make no sense,
Right, right.
and experience. Those are the only things. There's not a class that you missed. There's not a opportunity that you missed that someone else took advantage of. We're all out here trying to figure it out. That's the reason why we exist. That's the reason why credit counselors are here. Is because we know that folks are trying to figure it out, and it's tough.
Man, I'm a living. I mean, it's probably why my career at Black Enterprise has been driven by this passion and this awareness
Mm.
of everything you just said. Because I was raised in a working poor household in a working class community by a divorced single mother. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I learned about saving because she was good at that. She has
Yeah, she had no choice, I'm
right. You
sure.
can make $1 to 15 cents, but
Yeah.
investing, debt management, that was world that had nothing to do with our world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember, and again, you talk about the feelings of shame and guilt. So then I'm successful. I go to college. I ultimately end up at Black Enterprise. Fast forward, I'm the editor of a national magazine that's focused on business and finance, on money. And that was the trigger that helped me start learning about it. But I was in my late 20s when I came to Black Enterprise, and it wasn't until my mid 30s that that the cumulative effect of being in that world started to kick in, and my financial literacy journey began. But to the outside world, I'm 32, 33 years old. I'm at that point, like a number 2, number 3 editor at Black Enterprise magazine, and the assumption is you're college educated, you speak on financial topics, you interview these financial experts. What do you mean at that point you
Yeah.
don't own your first home? What does that mean? You don't know how to manage your credit. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
And I went through that again. I lived the shame when it was like, how can me and my wife, my then wife, successful professionals, she worked on Wall Street. I'm editor of this national magazine, but
Mm-hmm.
like you said, there's no magic trigger that takes
Yeah.
you to understanding that world with
Yeah.
like you said, people assume, oh, of course you must know that. Of course.
So here you remind me of something. One of the things that we think about a lot in our innovation work at GreenPath is understanding human behavior and thinking about triggers that cause so when we think about problems and potential solutions for problems, you always have to consider the story as to how they got to that point. And almost always, when someone is looking for a financial answer, it's almost always in response to to some trauma or some circumstance that has caused a problem. So our learning and our research around trying to extend and expand our financial literacy is almost always reactionary.
Mm.
It's almost never proactive, which is how we typically learn about stuff in school, right? You learn about your math, your writing, your social studies, whatever. You learn about it proactively because you are being armed with the tools to handle problems that you're going to encounter in the real world. We don't do that with finances. It's always, here are these educational tools that I have that got me this job, and now this job is getting me this financial responsibility that I have to navigate, but I don't really know what to do with it. So when there's a problem, say for example, there's a medical issue, I need to miss work, and now all of a sudden I'm taking out loans, credit cards, whatever, and now I have a problem. Now is when we start to think about, oh, like, well, how might I solve this problem?
Mm.
It's not a proactive um, thirst for knowledge. And this is not a judgment on society. It's unfortunately, it's just how we've set up our society. It's almost always a reactionary piece where I am trying to learn how to stop the bleeding. I'm trying to learn how to stop the problem. And the good news is, usually, not always, because we get a lot of people to call us back, but usually it's that first hardship or second hardship that learns you the lesson around how to avoid that in the future. And unfortunately, some people don't have an opportunity to make it through those hardships, and they end up having their life affected by it.
Right, right. So let's talk about that. To the reason I wanted to have you on the show at this
Sure.
time is a common thread for many of us is the holiday spending happens. There's a lot of emotion.
Yes.
There's a lot of emotion around what I remember that I had back or when I was a kid, or what I didn't have that I want to have now, that I'm successful and I want to, those things I felt, I'm trying to recover from deprivation from the past, and I want to ball out. Why should I not have what I want? Why should my kids not have what I didn't get to have? There's also the element of what people think I'm supposed to have. That was the other thing that I wrestled with early in my professional life. Like, I'm supposed to drive a certain kind of car. I'm supposed to have, Christmas, there should be presents falling out from under the Christmas tree. Like that. Because I'm, senior vice president of this, that, and the other, and we're the Huxtables. And so, whatever it is that drives us,
Man.
and then, of course, the idea that you should be generous during the holiday season. Now talking to an audience, well, I'm sure a significant portion of our audience is like, man, I went overboard. Now the party's over. That financial hangover is hitting. The bills ain't coming due yet, but they're coming, and I'm not necessarily prepared. And so, I really want to have you talk about practical things that people should be doing. Whether they're in trouble or not. Maybe they're not in trouble, but they do want to recover from their budget, their spending. They want to go into the new year with a healthier footing. What are some of the things that you would recommend that they focus on as they, kind of recover from holiday spending, try to get their debt and their credit back under control if it's out of control, do it without feeling guilty or ashamed about it? It's like, okay, but do some practical things that can help them move forward into the new year.
Yeah. So the first thing I would say is obviously, I know we're talking post holiday. First thing I would say is, if there was a time machine, let's make sure that we set up a holiday budget, because that's not something that we always think about. But now, let's say, for example,
I mean, like, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay, you're here now. Let's not just what's happened here. Now, remember, this thing's going to come around again in 12 months.
It's going to come around again. So next time around, now that you feel how you feel right now, think about that holiday budget and try your best to stick to it. And of course, I know that's easier said than done. The other piece I would say around the empathy piece with respect to feeling guilty, and that's I could talk for a long time about that, but like, there's so many expectations that are put on Black Americans, particularly Black Americans who are achieving, who are trying to make a name for themselves in that middle class, that working middle class, that upper middle class space, where there is this promise of economic freedom and economic flexibility that is there, but it feels and is practically different for Black and brown folks than it is for white folks sometimes, right? Like there's stuff that comes with it that places extra pressure on us to keep up with the Joneses and to maintain these expectations of success. So don't feel like you shouldn't be embarrassed by it. You should not feel extra pressure on that.
Well,
But I totally
just
understand.
to interrupt, speaking of
Yeah, yeah.
something else our parents didn't have to deal with,
Mm-hmm.
they also didn't have to deal with a social media world where everybody's posting, oh, look what I
Yes.
got in my Christmas tree and my fit, look at the fit and look at the party
Yeah.
and look. And we know that's a highlight film, not the real life, but there
Oh
is
my goodness.
that thing, look, I got to let people know I told people I was a boss lady all year. How can I not show
Mm-hmm.
out my fit for
Mm-hmm.
Christmas and New Year? So there's that added pressure of
And that's new. That's new. Like
yeah,
you said, that's our generation that deals with that. And I'll admit, like you said, I'm similar to you in the sense that I work in the financial wellness area, but I'm still learning. I'm still putting it together myself. And from just a quick personal moment, like when I was growing up, and my parents did an amazing job with me and my older sisters. We grew up sort of working middle class, and I was able to get great educational opportunities, and I'm doing well now. But one of the things that we did not do very often was travel. Like we didn't go to Disney World, we didn't go to the vacation on Jamaica or whatever. One of the first things I did when I got grown was, and I got a little bit of money, I said I'm going to an island. I'm gonna go to Jamaica, go to somewhere, and I look at the price. Hey, way more. No wonder my parents didn't travel nowhere when I was coming up. so I get it. I understand, right? There's these expectations. Social media makes it work or makes it worse. Um, but I would say that to have empathy and to have patience with yourself, because you're not alone, first and foremost. Now that that's out of the way, what are some practical steps you can take? I think the first thing, and this is always the hardest thing, but it does wonders in terms of like putting where you are in perspective, is to pause, take a moment, and really like do an honest, not really a budget, but an honest reflection of your expenses over the holiday weekend. Get an idea, or the holiday period, however long it was. Get a true, real estimate of how much money you have actually spent. And it shouldn't be too hard. One of the nice things about technology is it makes it really easy for us to pull up our receipts, our bank statements, all that stuff. Take inventory of the extent to which you maybe overspent. And I know it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to look at. I totally understand. But I think it puts in perspective where you are, and it gives you a point of view around like what your options could be moving forward. Because it's possible, maybe not likely, but it's possible that you may not have overspent as bad as you think you did if you've got, a holiday bonus or some sort of check coming in. But even if you did overspend in a way that maybe takes you by surprise, it's better that you understand that surprise early than a few months down the line where it starts to cascade into other problems and then you start missing other payments.
man,
Right. So
you
an
make a point
assessment.
about
Yeah, yeah.
going to be scared and you don't want to look at it. But one of the things
Hmm.
that I've learned just from your example, because I used to be that guy who's like, I'm not even going to look.
Yeah.
I'm not going to open up this thing. I know it's bad. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
scary thing is what you think it is. It is
Yeah.
almost never, when you actually look at it, the monster is
Hmm.
never as bad or as ugly as you
Yeah.
think it is. So,
100%.
it's when you don't look at it that it feels scary. And I've learned over
100%.
time is that then you look at it and you're like, well, this is not as scary
Hmm.
as I thought it was going to be, because your imagination is a lot scarier than the real thing. So
Yeah.
I tell people it's very important, not just for financial stuff. Most of the time, no matter how bad you think it is, it's never that bad. But you can't tell if you won't at least look it in the face.
Exactly. And anxiety will do that to you. I know a lot of folks in my generation and younger suffer from a lot of anxiety type stuff, and I totally get that. I'm someone who has anxiety myself. But
Me too, by the way.
there you go. So taking the opportunity to really just kind of tackle it and really fully take inventory of where you are is going to be very helpful. Even if it hurts at first, it's going to be helpful because then you can start to craft a game plan, right? So say for example, you're overspending. I imagine most of us will likely do most of our overspending via credit cards, because if it's your debit card, it's only so much you can spend until you run out of money. So they'll let you know when you're out of money. Credit cards, that's what gets you in trouble with credit cards, right? Is because there is, and I know you know this, but for the audience, this is a helpful visual. When you think about debit cards, you are taking money from the pool of money that exists in your bank account. It is finite, it is tangible. You know when it's there, you know when it's not. Credit cards are theoretically the same thing, except there's a separation between, it's not pulling from your bank account right away. What it's doing, you are borrowing against a credit line that you then have to pay back. So what can sometimes happen, and often happens, is that you are spending at a rate that is out of sync with your actual income. So instead of thinking about, I've got this $3,000, or $4,000 monthly net income that I'm working with, and then I've got this $2,000 credit card line, it's very easy for us to think about, oh, I've got $6,000 of money to play with. What you have is 2,000 of that $4,000 here on this credit card that you will be responsible for later. That's what makes it difficult to catch up, that's what makes it easy to fall behind on credits, because they're out of sync. Yeah. And that's the business model, right? Because you are making the credit card companies money by paying the credit, or the interest rate, right?
Well,
So
you to educate myself on that, because again, I made, like I said, this is a journey for all of us.
Yeah.
I was one of those people that said, "Yeah, here's what I got to work with. I got $5,000 here in this account, and I got $7,000 on these 2 credit cards that I can work with. That means I got $12,000 to work with."
Yeah.
But you're right, no, it's not. You got $5,000, but every dollar you put on the credit is coming out of that $5,000.
Coming out of that, it's not, might not come out of it right away, but eventually it's going to come out of it.
Plus interest. Whereas if I
plus interest,
and
exactly.
So I've learned to teach myself and say, what you're really getting when you use card, you're buying time. You're not getting more money. You're saying, okay, if I this money, I'm willing to pay interest, because I'm going to take this $1,000 out of my bank to pay for it later. Now you got to make some judgments about how much later and how much interest you want to pay over time. But that's what I had to break myself out of this habit of thinking, oh, I got this much money to work with because I'm counting the available balance of my cards.
Yep. So with that said, the credit cards are usually where folks are going to do their overspending. And then you're going to start to feel the pressure. You're going to start to feel the heat, especially when those minimum payments start going up. You start to maybe miss payments, and all of a sudden you feel the impact that it could have on your credit. So first things first, understanding what it can potentially do to your credit score. We talked about this judgment that is attached to the credit score, and it's very important to a lot of folks. We could have another conversation, maybe another time, about like maybe the credit score being maybe not as much of a judgment of your character as people think it is. I mean, it really doesn't have a whole lot to do with you. It's more about your ability to pay back somebody else's money, which is, there are a lot of folks that don't do well with their money necessarily, but understand that concept, and they have high credit scores as a result. So with that in mind, there actually are a lot more options to help you get out of credit card debt than people realize. One of the first things you can do, and this is why I'm here to talk about what we do at GreenPath. I talked earlier about our debt management program, right? Our debt management program is an opportunity. So if you give us a call at GreenPath or any other credit counselor, or NFCC certified credit counselor, many of them are going to have debt management programs where they can help you. If your credit cards have truly gotten to a point where you really need help managing them, our debt management program is an opportunity for us to reach out to the credit card companies on your behalf and use the relationships that we have with them to negotiate much lower interest rates, so that you can pay off those debts much, much more effectively. The trade-off, and again, this is sometimes the place where you lose folks, but when they understand what's at stake, I think it's easy for them to see the upside. The trade-off is that when you do these debt management programs, the expectation is that you are getting rid of this debt. So the credit card would be closed at that point, right? Credit card is going to be closed, and there are a lot of reactions. So, if I close my credit card, how's that going to affect my credit score? And my answer to that question is that your credit score is being much more adversely affected by the missed credit card payments and the maxed out balance than it is by closing the account. Usually, if your if your credit balance is over 30% of the credit limit, it's at that point where your credit score is starting to get damaged. And if you've overspent in your credit cards and they're maxed out, damage is being done. It's much more advantageous for you long run to close out those credit cards, lower the interest rate significantly, and get on a concentrated, consolidated repayment plan with the express goal of paying off that debt really efficiently so you can get out of that hole and move on with your financial journey. This is a really, really, really useful tool for dealing with holiday credit card debt, especially because of how much we depend on credit cards for our holiday spending. Does that make sense?
Totally makes sense. Totally makes sense. And it's important to remind people, again, why you can't let it be a judgment call. Credit scores go up and down during the course of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a measure of your character. So, like you said, if you get it under control, yes, maybe it does go down a little bit temporarily because you close the account. But if you're in a better, healthier financial position, then your future financial journey, it'll recover.
For sure.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Yeah. I would say one of the questions I used to ask a lot of my clients was what what a credit score means to them. And a lot of the times folks will straight up say that, it's a reflection of your credit worthiness is the word that they use, but oftentimes what they mean is like how, is it a measure of your character or not? Are you a person that can be trusted with money because of your character? And I think that maybe a better way to think about credit is, are you credit worthy from the lender's perspective? It has nothing to do with you as a person. It's about protecting the lender's investment, right? And the only way that you can improve credit is by demonstrating to these lenders that you have the ability to pay back their money on time. Doesn't have anything to do with you as a person. And so I think once people understand the mathematics behind the credit score and recognize that it really is, they call it a credit game for a reason. And that like, if you don't use credit, or if you maybe an elder who is only using Social Security and has their home paid off and doesn't really need credit cards, your credit score is not going to be very high because you haven't been demonstrating, you haven't been flexing that credit repayment muscle. And so like understanding that makes it, I think, much easier for folks to understand their relationship with how they spend their money and how they're treating the credit cards, how that reflects on their credit score. And I think that might help ease some of the anxiety that comes along with it. It can always be improved, and it's not a reflection of who you are as a person.
You kind of get people to think about, one, budgeting, preparing for the following year so that they don't necessarily repeat the cycle. They feel more in control about going into that. And like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you don't always stick to the plan, but it's better to have a plan that you deviate from than to not have a plan at all. So at least you're starting from a ground point. Then you go into, okay, here are some tools.
Yeah.
In this place, you talk about this tool with GreenPath or other. And I do want to emphasize, we talk about NFCC.
Mm-hmm.
I get the mixed up. You want an NFCC certified credit counselor. And
NFCC.
You can do a whole other show on what that means. But it is important to really get certified, NFCC certified credit counseling. So those in the audience who are looking for a service, if it's not GreenPath, you definitely want to look for that certification because it says something about the way that counseling service operates to protect you and your interests as a service. Now you give us at least one tool for how do you get that debt under control and why do you get that debt under control. Let's talk about how that can be a great positive, in my opinion, jumping off point into just having a better financial New Year period. I mean, I just, in my own experience, I've seen with others where what seems like a traumatic experience. Oh man, we overspent, and look, oh my God, how are we gonna pay this off? And this is gonna mess up my credit. To getting help, whether it's through a credit counselor like GreenPath or some other trigger, like you said, and using it as a teaching point, a leverage point, change your financial life going forward.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe the easiest way to think about it is it provides structure. So just to give a personal non-financial example of this, I played I played college basketball, a little D3 school, nothing crazy. Um, but I was a good student. I was always a good student, but I noticed that my grades were almost always better during the basketball season than they were outside of the season. You would think, oh, well, you've got way more time. You don't have to practice. You can just you can take your time. But that was a problem. I had way too much time out of season. When I was in season, I had class, I had practice from 4 to 7, I had games. So it was very structured. Like I knew when I had to be here. I knew when I had time to do my work. I knew when I was supposed to be at practice. So it was harder when I had more free time. It was easier for me to goof around, whatever, waste time. A similar situation can be maybe taken advantage of if you have sort of instituted some foundational guidance for yourself. So say for example you get on a debt management program, or you talk to your creditor and they close out the credit card and give you a hardship program or something like that, where there are now some structural limitations in place. It gives you clear expectations, and it gives you clear limits on how to navigate, or like what options you might have, and it makes it easier for you to make informed decisions about how to navigate within that new structure. And for a lot of folks like myself, that actually was helpful for me. It was helpful. I was more focused, I was more efficient, and it could be an opportunity to use some of this new holiday spending discipline after the aftermath of the overspending. This new discipline, these new guidelines in
I've
place
seen
to
it over and
start
over
building better
again,
habits moving
where
forward.
like I said, when you can do anything, I tell you, when you can get to say yes to anything, you don't know what to say no to, and it's being able to say yes all the time that gets you in trouble. And
Mm-hmm.
we think freedom is the ability to do whatever we want, and I tell people
Yep.
freedom is to do whatever you really want by saying no to the things that might be nice to have, but you don't want it. You don't really want it. So if you learn how to say no to the nice
I love
things,
that.
then you can say yes to the things you really, really want. And in our culture, in our society, as an American society, Western
Mhm.
culture in general, it's easy to get sucked into. You can have whatever you want, and you can, but that's not the same as you can have what you really, really
Mhm.
want, and that means you can say no to other things. So to your point, I just know so many people who, once upon a time, thought of themselves as financially irresponsible, but because they went through, whether it's credit counseling, whether it went through a financial challenge that made them, maybe they did a budget for their very, very first time, or maybe it was their first time even knowing how much money
Mhm.
was coming in or how much money was going out, and that became the starting point for, I like knowing. I like having, I know what my monthly expenses are. I know what my
Yeah.
monthly, and then they start setting goals for how they can increase their income. Now I'm not just going to plan to go on vacation. I'm going to budget to go on vacation because I know what I'm working with. And so you're right. This is often a very, very strong trigger, not a negative trigger as in trauma, but a positive trigger to my journey of having control of my
Mhm.
money and my resources. Like you said, I have some limits and some boundaries, and that gives me more freedom. Actually, we think of lack of control as freedom, but having a sense of
Yeah.
control is actually real freedom and security, because the next time something goes wrong. Because the other thing I think is important to say before we wrap up, I know we're running out of time, is that life happens. Even for those people who are they're disciplined and they manage their budget and they know where every penny is going and they don't spend money they don't have. But the biggest cause of bankruptcy is still a health emergency, where it's not something you did wrong. Something happened, and or you talked about the Great Recession or the housing collapse, where a lot of people who were not financially irresponsible ended up taking on debt that they had no choice but to take on, and then they were put into bad positions. So it's very important when you feel like you have, as you said, when you found out that the natural boundaries you had during the season you could apply in the off season. That's what we're talking about now, because the off season is now, it's not Christmas, and it's very easy to relax into. Oh, I got past that. I'm good, and then 9 months go by and you're back in the same position. Yeah. So that take this off season to say,
You're
let's take
back
that
into the same
discipline
situation.
that
Yep.
got us out of trouble and apply it to the off. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Get in the gym.
That's right.
Go
That's
lift
right.
some weights. Go shoot.
Because
Go get some
we know,
shots up.
okay, now I just got finished saying there's a 9-month or 10-month off season. But we know this often happens during birthdays. Often there's these times when we become, we're emotionally and socially rewarded for overspending. When all said and done, overspending is an acceptable, I want to say addiction. Like it's not acceptable to abuse alcohol, but it's not really. Yeah,
Sure.
but it is acceptable and even rewarded in the short term.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
You use your credit card.
100%. 100%. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
People don't complain about shopping addiction until it hurts.
Yeah.
Right, but our economy loves it. What?
Till it hurts your finances.
You ain't spend no money today?
Yeah. Yeah. Here's an ad. Here's an ad on your phone. You ain't go to Starbucks yet today. Boom, here's an ad.
Stepping out the door, and as soon as they hit the step, a price tag, I walk out, $500. It's like every time you go outside, you're going to spend money. So stay in the house. Avoid spending money, stay in the house. But
yeah. And they make you that don't even work anymore because you can get on your phone and spend $500.
My phone is always sitting beside me like, what, you ain't picking me up yet, bro? You got those there's this coat that I saw. And now that ad is following me around, bro. I know you want that coat. Ain't it time to go to that coat?
Yep.
Yeah. So listen, man, I'm so glad you're so generous with your time.
Very true.
What's the best way for our audience to tap into?
Of course.
Whether it's GreenPath, other resources, or just to follow you on social or whatever.
I would say just tap in with us at GreenPath Financial Wellness and the work that we're doing with our innovation function. GreenPath, GreenPath Innovation and Design. Just type us into Google. We're doing some really cool stuff. We're using some of our innovative flexibility to try to think about creating some new tools and new products for Black and brown folks to be better with their finances and to have more options for an equitable financial future. It's really exciting stuff. So,
bro, I really appreciate not only your time, but your expertise, your lived experience, which is so important to a show like this. Thank you for joining me on this latest edition of Your Money, Your Life. And guys, another great show. I'm always promising, my guests always deliver. This episode of Your Money, Your Life has been brought to you by Prudential. I'm Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor of Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on Your Money, Your Life.